Imagine this. You live your whole life trying to belong, seeking approval, and molding yourself into expectations that aren't even yours. You crave validation, dread judgment, and believe that you are your worth based on what others think. But what if what you've learned about caring too much has been keeping you from truly living? What if the secret to real happiness, confidence, and achievement is not controlling everything, but letting go centuries before his time? A great thinker, Michel de Montaigne, investigated this paradox fully. His philosophy is a roadmap to inner liberty, self-acceptance, and the art of living unencumbered. He upended the very assumptions of what we think about identity, achievement, and societal pressure. By the time you reach the end of this journey, you will know why the second you stop needing people's approval, everything in your life begins to make sense. Consider it. How much of your frustration and anxiety is caused by attempting to live up to expectations that aren't even yours? How many times do you let yourself down because you don't want to be judged? How much of your energy goes into fretting about things that in the big picture of life don't matter? Montaigne's philosophy shows a plain but invincible truth. The more we release external pressures, the more we are aligned with our true selves. He believed that life was uncertain, perfection an illusion, and self-acceptance the greatest kind of wisdom. But that is where the majority of people go wrong. Not caring is not being apathetic, lazy, or unmotivated. It is not walking away from life or sidestepping responsibilities. It is breaking free from needing constant approval, fear of rejection, and the tiring tendency to overthink each step. It is about living on your own terms, being in the now, and recognizing that you don't need to prove anything to anyone. Montaigne devoted much of his life to thinking about the nature of human action. He noted that humans are usually captives of their own minds, trapped in perpetual loops of anxiety, self-doubt, and insecurity. He challenged us to ask ourselves why we let other people's opinions decide for us, why we hold on to control when the world can be unpredictable, and why we pursue a definition of success that isn't even our own. And most significantly, he asked, what if we just didn't care about these things anymore? When you don't care about being perfect anymore, you accept your flaws. When you care less about others' approval, you begin to live for yourself. When you care less about controlling everything, you give room for life to happen naturally. And here is the catch. The less you care about trying to prove yourself, the stronger you get. Reflect on the most confident, charismatic individuals you've ever known. Are they the ones who are always trying to get approval, explaining themselves too much, and trying to be friends with everybody? Or are they the ones who look comfortable, unaffected by little cares, and unapologetically themselves? Montaigne knew this secret way back before modern psychology established it. Folks are attracted to authenticity. When you quit looking for approval, when you love your flaws, and when you believe in yourself, you automatically become more appealing. Not only socially, but in all walks of life. The instant you step away from fear of failure or judgment, you open yourself up to something far greater than that. Freedom. Freedom to risk, without overanalysis. Freedom to be yourself without inhibition. Freedom to just be without constantly comparing yourself to external scales of measurement. And this is where it gets really interesting. When you release the things you don't need to worry about, not only are you at peace, but things in your life improve. Relationships get better. Opportunities seem to happen naturally, and making decisions is easier because they are founded upon what you actually do want rather than what you believe you should want. This is the crux of Montaigne's philosophy. He felt that most of us suffer from fighting reality, attempting to mold life into something it will not fit. But when you let go of that resistance, everything starts falling into place. Consider this. How many times have you stepped back from expressing your thoughts because you were concerned about what other people would say? How often do you repeat conversations over in your mind, thinking about how you were seen? How much of your life has been lived under expectations that never belonged to you? Montaigne challenges us to move beyond these self-imposed constraints. He dares us to welcome uncertainty, to affirm imperfection, and to finally stop letting fear control our decisions. And this is only the start, for as we move further into his philosophy, we will discover actionable strategies to implement this way of thinking in your life. Strategies that will enable you to overcome mental blocks, make decisions with confidence, and fully indulge in the freedom of release. Rucked, it is a very real blueprint for changing the way you live. And now we push it a step further. What do things look like when you really live this way? What shifts when you no longer pursue the validation of others, fret over every imaginable scenario, and let terror guide your choices? Imagine waking up one morning and discovering that most of the burdens dragging you down were never real to start with. That the guidelines you have been adhering to, the expectations you have been attempting to fulfill, and the phobias that have had you trapped were all delusions spawned by society, conditioning, and your own mind. Montaigne knew that human beings are innately nervous. We are constantly overthinking, trying to predict the future, and struggling against the unknown. But what if the key to happiness is not in solving every problem, but in surrendering to the fact that some things are simply out of our control? One of Montaigne's most powerful lessons is this: the world will never fully understand you, and that is perfectly okay. Consider this. How much energy do we squander attempting to justify ourselves, explain ourselves, or demonstrate our value to individuals who might never actually see us? We censor our genuine opinions to prevent disagreement. We repress our authentic desires to be accepted. We seek external validation constantly, when the only validation that really matters is self-validation. Montaigne thought that most of our misery arises out of loving too much the things that aren't of use to us. He watched how individuals get themselves tied up over minor issues, doting on resentments, fears, and insecurities that in the end contribute nothing to their existence. And yet, when you look at it from afar, you can see that most of these cares are very little in the scheme of things. Ever noticed how the instant you quit worrying over a challenge, a solution shows up on its own? When you leave someone's attention alone, they become interested. It is no accident. It is a manifestation of a greater truth. When you release, life moves. The catch is, most people fight this. They figure that if they don't care, they will lose interest. That not caring is an act of giving up. This is mistaken. Not caring isn't being apathetic. It isn't being lazy. It is about turning your attention to what is most important and unburdening yourself from the excess weight. Montaigne urged us to accept imperfection, not only in ourselves, but in the world at large. He knew that attempting to achieve total control is a draining, ongoing fight. Life is unpredictable, and regardless of how much we attempt to plan, prepare, and work the system, there will always be things that lie outside of our control. So why not just accept that? Why not embrace the fact that mistakes, failures, and uncertainties are simply part of the deal? Think how light you would feel if you let go of trying to control every aspect of your life. If you didn't overthink every decision, if you didn't fear failure and instead viewed it as merely the next step on your path. Montaigne points out that all of the great thinkers, leaders, and artists throughout history have experienced failure, rejection, and misunderstanding. But they did not let those things shape them. They walked on, indifferent to what the crowd thought, because they knew that real success lies not in what others say about us, but in living real. And here is where it gets even more fascinating. When you embrace this mindset, people notice. You become more confident, more attractive, and more master of your own destiny. Not because you are making things happen, but because you are no longer expending energy on things that do not work for you. Why is it that some people appear to be effortlessly successful, and others seem to struggle no matter how hard they work? It is not always talent. It is not always intelligence. Sometimes it isn't even working hard. It is mindset. The people who succeed realize that letting go of useless concerns frees them up for what really counts. Montaigne's words are wise because they remind us that the more we let go, the more we gain. When we no longer fear failure, we risk more. When we no longer crave approval, we are more real. When we no longer try to control, we create space for surprising opportunities to emerge. This is why the philosophy of not caring, when done right, is not about letting go, but about gaining liberation. It is about deciding where to place your energy, investing in only what brings meaning, and declining to be bogged down by distractions that create no true value in your life. Consider your own life for a moment. How much of your anxiety is caused by care about what other people think? How many times have you ever refrained from going after something you really wanted out of fear of judgment? How many times do you rehash failures in your head, thinking that beating yourself up over them will somehow alter them? Montaigne's strategy frees us from these chains in the mind. He reminds us that the past is past, the future is unknown, and the only thing we actually own is now. And when you really grasp this truth, everything starts to change. But there is still more to discover, because in the next section, we'll learn about a surprising revelation: how detachment, instead of driving us to isolation, in fact leads to stronger and more intimate connections with others. There is a bizarre paradox in life. The moment you no longer need something, it usually comes to you by itself. When you no longer seek approval, people will respect you more. When you no longer fear failure, opportunities come. And when you no longer try to control everything, life starts flowing in ways you never anticipated. This is among the most intense lessons in Montaigne's philosophy. Detachment is not about escape. It is a road to greater fulfillment. By releasing the tendency to try to control results, you allow yourself to flow with the natural order of life. And by doing this, you start to feel something quite amazing: peace, power, and connectedness. But the question is, if detachment is that powerful, why can most not accept it? The reason is simple. Because we have been conditioned to think that control is security. We have learned that if we work hard enough, plan well enough, and worry enough, we can make the world conform to what we want. But Montaigne tells us that this is an illusion. No level of control can abolish uncertainty. No level of planning can avert the unforeseen, and no level of fretting can alter what is. Rather than fighting life, he encourages us to welcome it just the way it is, with all its unpredictability, imperfection, and disorder. Reflect on your relationships. How many disagreements occur due to unfulfilled expectations? How much pain is inflicted by wanting individuals to behave in a certain manner? How frequently do we attempt to manipulate others' opinions, behaviors, and feelings, only to become frustrated, disappointed, or hurt? Montaigne knew that deep connection is not about mastery. It is about acceptance. The more you permit others to be themselves without an attempt to change them or squeeze them into your notions, the richer and more authentic your relationships are. That is why the people who practice detachment also tend to have more love, respect, and admiration. They do not smother others with demands or expectations. They are not needy of constant reassurance. They just exist in states of peace and confidence, where other people can freely come and go. And paradoxically, this makes them more desirable, more respected, and more prized. Have you ever wondered why the individuals who need most to be noticed get the least notice, while individuals who are content with themselves tend to attract others? This is the strength of letting go. Montaigne felt that how we connect with others is an accurate picture of how we connect with ourselves. If we are forever in search of validation, it means we have not yet embraced ourselves. If we dread being alone, it means we have not yet learned to be comfortable with our own presence. If we require others to behave in a certain manner in order for us to feel secure, it means we have not developed our own inner stability. But the instant you turn your attention inward, when you no longer try to control others, when you no longer fear solitude, when you no longer measure your value by the standards of others, you are absolutely free. Consider this: how much of your emotional energy is directed at responding to the words and deeds of others? How much does someone else's opinion dictate your mood on a daily basis? How often have you clung to anger, resentment, or disappointment, only to discover that it was useless later on? Montaigne is saying to us that inner peace does not come from the approval of others, and once you get this, everything changes in your way of living. Think of roaming the earth undeterred by criticism. Think of confronting uncertainty without fear. Picture being able to love and enjoy people without feeling obligated to control them. This is what occurs once you stop. Caring for things that do not really matter is what drags us down. And here is the most crucial part. Detachment is not withdrawal from life. It is not indifference or insensitivity. It is going fully into the world, but with no attachment, with no excessive concern, and with no necessity to try to control. Montaigne's philosophy is balance. It is about loving what is most important to you, your values, your purpose, your peace of mind, and letting go of the things that drain your energy and don't serve a real purpose. So you have to ask yourself, what are you holding on to that is no longer serving you? What expectations, fears, or attachments are holding you back? And what would it look like if you just let them go? Consider this. How much of your emotional energy is directed at responding to the words and deeds of others? How much does someone else's opinion dictate your mood on a daily basis? How often have you clung to anger, resentment, or disappointment, only to discover that it was useless later on? Montaigne is saying to us that inner peace does not come from the approval of others. And once you get this, everything changes in your way of living. Think of roaming the earth undeterred by criticism. Think of confronting uncertainty without fear. Picture being able to love and enjoy people without feeling obligated to control them. This is what occurs once you stop. Caring for things that do not really matter is what drags us down. And here is the most crucial part. Detachment is not withdrawal from life. It is not indifference or insensitivity. It is going fully into the world, but with no attachment, with no excessive concern, and with no necessity to try to control. Montaigne's philosophy is balance. It is about loving what is most important to you, your values, your purpose, your peace of mind, and letting go of the things that drain your energy and don't serve a real purpose. So you have to ask yourself, what are you holding on to that is no longer serving you? What expectations, fears, or attachments are holding you back? And what would it look like if you just let them go? As we enter the second half of this journey, we discover the final epiphany, why letting go of uncertainty, imperfection, and detachment not only results in inner peace, but in a life of greater significance, accomplishment, and fulfillment. Perhaps you are thinking now, if letting go is so potent, why don't more people practice it? Why are so many stuck in the vicious circle of anxiety, approval, seeking, and control? The reason is fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of failure, fear of what will occur if we don't micromanage every single thing in our lives. We have been conditioned by society to think that if we let go, the world will collapse. But the thing is, once you no longer care about the things that really don't matter, everything works. Montaigne's philosophy is not one of being irresponsible. It is one of being wise. He shows us that by giving up on the worries that are not necessary, we acquire clarity. By letting go of control, we acquire freedom. And by welcoming uncertainty, we acquire a life of greater significance and joy. Consider your best moments of your life. The moments that really counted. Were they scripted to the last minute? Or did they occur spontaneously when you didn't even know that they were coming? Some of the loveliest things in life can't be engineered. Love, inspiration, creativity, and even success. They tend to arrive when you are no longer pursuing them, when you make room for them to occur organically. Think of the artist who no longer cares if their work will be embraced by the world, and so produces something that is really magnificent. The businessman or woman who ceases to fear failure, dares greatly, and thereby revolutionizes an entire sector. The individual who ceases to frantically seek love, and in that freedom of self-acceptance, finds the proper person with ease. This is the life paradox. What you grasp too tightly tends to flee, but what you let go of tends to return to you in more unexpected ways than you ever thought possible. Montaigne reminds us that life is supposed to be an ease, not a struggle. Sure, there will be adversity, defeats, and uncertainties, but resisting them, struggling against them, and dwelling on them merely contributes to our misery. Instead, he urges us to go with the flow of life, to embrace its flaws, to laugh at its absurdities, and to rejoice even in the mess. Because here is the final truth. You don't have to control everything in order to be happy. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. You don't have to fear the unknown, because life itself is not known, and that is what makes it beautiful. When you cease to care about others' approval, you become self-assured. When you cease to be afraid of failing, you become unbreakable. When you cease to attempt to govern every minute detail, you give room for enchantment to occur. And that is what Montaigne realized hundreds of years ago. Wisdom lies not in attempting to subdue life, but in mastering the art of dancing with life. So as you continued, you ask yourself, what can you release today? What unnecessary baggage have you been lugging around that no longer benefits you? And what would your life be like if you just had faith that things will work out? Because the instant you stop investing in the wrong things, the right ones come to you. And that is the real strength of Montaigne's philosophy.